right, fifth graders, today we are going to be learning about the text structure, compare and contrast. Now I'm going to take a quick look over here at our board that we've been using to identify the different text structures. Now comparing and contrasting is when the author discusses similarities and differences between a lot of different things. People, concepts, even ideas, and clues the author may give to you to identify what text structure they're using are. Likenesses and differences are discussed also both in contrasting. So they may say these two things are similar, they are different, and it lists for you the different things they have in common and things they may have in difference with one another. So looking at our text structure visual today is with comparing and contrasting, we typically have two topics. And when we think of a Venn diagram, that's exactly what we're doing with comparing and contrasting. The things that are not overlapping are what they have different from one another, and the areas that are overlapping is what they have in similarities with one another. So, signal words that are using for comparing are as well as, also, to, like, similar, both. Contrasting words are however, but, on the other hand, while, though, different from, yet, whereas. So, it's important to know with this text structure, the author cannot just compare, they cannot just contrast, they have to compare and they have to contrast. So we're going to jump down to our guided reading passage that I'm going to be reading with you, and we're going to be underlining signal words that show the different comparing and contrasting aspects of this text. Here we go. Make sure you're following along with me. There are two major categories of books, fiction and nonfiction. These categories have many differences. Fiction books are usually written to entertain the reader, and the stories are not real. On the other hand, nonfiction books are filled with facts and are often written to inform or teach the reader about a specific topic. Fiction stories contain characters, a setting, and a plot, whereas nonfiction stories contain charts, graphs, maps, timelines, and diagrams. Fiction and nonfiction can be similar in some ways too. They both can contain illustrations to help the reader understand the text. They both typically contain a table of contents. Students need to read both fiction and nonfiction to meet academic standards and succeed in school. So some signal words I identified in this text were, the first one were many differences. Okay, that's telling me as a reader, the author is going to start identifying the differences between these texts. Okay, also another signal word that I read was on the other hand. Oh, that moved the wrong thing. Whoopsies. Okay, on the other hand. Another signal word that I read was similar in some ways too. And both was another signal word. So right there. So in this paragraph up here, the author is contrasting the differences between fiction and nonfiction. And down here, the author is comparing the fiction and nonfiction texts. So what makes this a compare and contrast text structure is the author identified both things that fiction and nonfiction texts have in common with one another. Okay? On this slide, I would like you to read this passage, and I'd like you to identify at least 4 signal words for compare and contrast, and then I write down what makes it a compare and contrast structure. Down below is the writing portion of us learning about this text structure. I composed this right here, and I'm going to use at least 2 signal words that we're going to identify. Here we go. I'm going to read it to you. There are differences between cats and dogs. To begin, cats clean themselves by licking their fur, while dogs are given baths. Cats use litter boxes as opposed to dogs which go outside. Cats meow while dogs bark. There are also several similarities between the two animals. Both animals are covered with fur. Most dogs and cats have 4 legs and a tail. Both like to be petted. Finally, they both make great pets. So 2 signal words I used in here. The first one would be differences. Oh goodness, this is going to happen. I don't know why it always happens to me on this slide. The first one is going to be differences. There are differences. That is a signal word that's telling me that I'm going to be starting to identify the differences between the animals. And the other signal word is going to be similarities. That's telling me I'm going to now compare the things that cats and dogs have in common with one another. I know these two lines are right here, guys, but I'm having a hard time moving them, so I'm just going to use my two. I just moved them up here. Right down here, I need to state why it's a compare and contrast. This passage is a compare and contrast structure because the author is identifying the similarities and differences between cats. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Cats and dogs. Okay. Down here, I want you guys to type your own compare and contrast text structure. It should be about 5 sentences. You can compare and contrast anything you want. You can compare and contrast your brother and your sister, or your 2 sisters or your 2 brothers. You can compare and contrast different grade levels, different schools, different towns, different states, different countries. There are tons of things that you guys can compare and contrast. You can compare and contrast the difference between strawberry jelly and grape jelly. I don't care. Just make sure you're following proper grammar and that you use and underline at least 2 signal words. And then last but not least, you type what makes that a compare and contrast text structure. When you are all done, make sure you hit turn in for me, and that should be it for this video. Good luck, guys.